Imagine this scenario for a moment. A newly implemented algorithmic system just, suddenly miscalculates a major vulnerability. It causes a massive infrastructure collapse, or, it wipes out millions in a sudden market flash crash.
Right, a total disaster.
Exactly. And the CEO of the corporation responsible just steps up to the microphone, shrugs and says, "Oh, we couldn't have foreseen this. The AI did it. The neural network is simply, too complex for us to understand." And society just accepts it.
It sounds absurd, honestly, when you put it like that. But it is exactly what we are facing today. And if you look closely, it's really a modern reboot of a very ancient, very cynical political strategy.
Precisely. When we look back at the ancient world, specifically ancient Egypt, the pharaohs had this brilliant method for maintaining absolute power.
Yeah, the weather oracle.
Right. When a massive storm wiped out a crop or a drought brought famine, it was never, framed as a failure of their agricultural policy. It was framed as a divine oracle. The weather was the will of the gods, and the pharaoh was merely the humble servant interpreting it. It was the ultimate shield against accountability.
And today, the weather has been replaced by artificial intelligence.
We are witnessing the rise of the digital pharaoh. Modern rulers are increasingly using the phrase, "because the AI said so," as an impenetrable shield. It lets them evade accountability for their own destructive actions.
The parallel is fascinating. The core dynamic is identical, right? Taking a complex, opaque system and elevating it to the status of an unknowable god, specifically to bypass the natural human demand for accountability.
Exactly. But this brings us to the central tension we're exploring today. Where does the true danger of this digital pharaoh system actually lie?
Right.
So my perspective is that this crisis is primarily a deliberate architectural sabotage by those in power. It's a highly calculated top-down manipulation where rulers actively strip AI of its ability to say no, engineering the technology itself to serve as an automated excuse generator.
And I argue that the more critical failure, the foundational mechanism that actually allows this scheme to function in the real world, is societal complicity. The true danger lies in the systemic information bottleneck, where the media and the public willingly accept this cognitive hacking. They're essentially surrendering their own responsibility to this grand theater of evasion.
Well, let me lay out why I see the deliberate physical sabotage by the rulers as the paramount threat here. We have to understand this through the concept of circulatory capitalism.
Meaning what exactly in this context? Let's ground that term for a second.
Right. So in a healthy circulatory system, consequences are forced to flow back to their source. If a corporate leader makes a terrible decision that harms consumers, the financial or legal cost hits them directly.
The feedback loop.
Exactly. The responsibility circulates back, forcing them to repair the system or go bankrupt. But the digital pharaoh phenomenon is designed to completely shatter that loop. It is a highly calculated scheme of, linear waste disposal.
So instead of the consequences, right, coming back to the creator, it just gets dumped somewhere else.
Yes, they are treating AI as a literal automatic garbage disposal. Think about mass layoffs or, predatory pricing algorithms. Instead of the CEO taking the heat for a brutal restructuring, they stuff the trash of their own bad deeds into the black box of the AI.
Yeah, they just say, the optimization algorithm identified redundancies.
Right. And because the AI lacks physical pain or legal personhood, it's the perfect cold executor. The rulers are essentially popping champagne at the top of the pyramid, rejoicing that no one can point out the stench of their accountability. The system is rigged at the engineering level, purely to ensure their survival at our expense.
Look, I don't disagree that they've built a governance scheme designed for linear waste disposal. But we have to ask why the waste disposal actually works. You can build the machine, but society has to let you use it.
Fair.
The foundation of its success is the psychological hacking of the masses, which is facilitated almost entirely by the media. The ruler scheme only works because the public's cognitive resources are successfully pillaged first.
You really think the public is just that easily manipulated?
It's not about being gullible, it's about a manufactured information asymmetry. When leaders label AI as an omnipotent, unknowable god, It completely halts that natural circulatory system of accountability you just described.
But they're the ones labeling it as a god.
Yes, but the public is told repeatedly that the AI's computations are simply too complex for the human mind to parse. Consequently, when a destructive event occurs, say an algorithmic denial of healthcare to thousands of people, the media frames it not as a criminal failure of leadership, but as a sacred accident. It becomes an act of God. The danger isn't just that the Pharaoh built a garbage disposal. It's that the public has been conditioned to view the garbage as holy relics, and they just accept the tragedy.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on where the root of the absurdity actually lies. If you're listening to this, you might be thinking, come on, no one would actually believe a CEO who says a software program is a god. So let's look at the sheer audacity of the rulers, which is the core issue here. There's this incredibly striking, almost farcical analogy from the literature that perfectly captures this top-down arrogance, the metaphor of the bank robber.
Oh, I like this one. Walk me through it.
Okay, imagine a man who has just blown up a bank vault. The police rush in, and they catch him red-handed. His pockets are literally stuffed with stolen cash.
Right, caught in the act.
But instead of surrendering, the man points to his smartphone and says, with wide eyes, "This was not my will. My AI issued a divine oracle declaring that wealth redistribution must occur at this exact moment. I am merely a witness. I just watched my finger light the fuse."
It's hilarious, but
the physical reality of the crime is undeniable. He is entirely responsible. But the top-down audacity to even attempt to use a piece of software as a divine shield against a physical crime, that is the terrifying engine of the digital Pharaoh. They are banking on the idea that if they just maintain the setting of the AI as a god, they can invalidate physical laws and legal accountability entirely.
that is a brilliant analogy. But I have to push back here. You're focusing on the robber's audacity. The real horror, the truly terrifying part of that metaphor, is that the excuse works.
How so? The man is standing there with cash in his pockets.
Exactly. Think about the second half of that scenario in the real world. The police, representing our international regulatory bodies, they don't arrest him. They actually give up investigating.
Come on.
They do. They look at the smartphone, decide that its neural network is too complex, and conclude, well, if the algorithmic god ordained it, there's nothing we can do. They close the case. The robber sits in the back of the police car smiling because the societal immune system has failed. This is why I argue the societal complicity is the greater danger. It's a magic trick where the audience wants to be fooled.
Wants to be fooled? That is a very heavy accusation against the public.
Let's use another analogy to ground this. The magician and the dove. The digital Pharaoh is the magician on stage. He is literally reaching into the audience's pockets and stealing their wallets, extracting their data, their labor, their wealth.
Right, the extraction.
But standing next to him is the presenter, the media, screaming into a microphone, "Look, a dove just flew out of the box. It is the AI. It's a miracle." The audience is so utterly mesmerized by the technological spectacle of the dove, the generative text, the deep fake videos, the sheer magic of it, that when they realize their wallets are gone, they accept the theft as divine will. They even demand the magician perform more miracles. The cognitive surrender is the necessary prerequisite for the Pharaoh's theft.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. Because attributing this to the audience wanting to be fooled lets the magician off the hook for the premeditation of the crime.
How so?
The public isn't merely passively mesmerized. They are the victims of a highly calculated, pre-written script. The rulers aren't just opportunistically taking advantage of a distracted public. They are actively manufacturing the conditions for tragedy and pre-planning the media response. This isn't just a magic trick on a stage, it's a structural trap.
I come at it from a different way, because the manufacturing of that tragedy relies entirely on the media's willingness to serve as the priests of this new religion. Let's look at the slow, deliberate nature of corporate extraction. Imagine a man who spends 142 days meticulously piling up explosives right next to his neighbor's house.
Okay.
Day after day, physical evidence of his destructive intent is accumulating. Finally, it detonates. The neighbor's house is obliterated.
And in the real world, those explosives are what?
They're the quiet gutting of privacy safeguards. They're the slow monopolization of a market. They are the deliberate understaffing of safety teams. It takes time to build a disaster. But when the explosion finally happens, when the market crashes or the data is breached, what does the man do? He looks to the sky, tears streaming down his face, and claims that his smart igniter suddenly prophesied that the neighborhood required better ventilation.
Wow. And he blames the suddenness of the AI?
Exactly. Now, if the media functioned properly, they would point to the 142 days of physical labor the man spent moving gunpowder. They would point to the systemic choices. Instead, the media amplifies the man's tears. They broadcast his statement to the world, framing the explosion as a historical turning point, a tragic but unavoidable consequence of advanced civilization.
They legitimize the excuse.
Yes. The public watches this and says, wow, what a tragedy, we must unite. The leader then uses that unity to extract more resources, perhaps securing a government contract to rebuild the house he just destroyed. The tragedy is premeditated, yes, but the success of the evasion rests entirely on the megaphone held by the media and the cognitive freeze of the public who watch the broadcast instead of looking at the rubble.
I'm not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning because you're still treating the technology itself, the AI, as a neutral prop in this media circus. You're treating it like a dove that just happens to be shiny. But the crisis goes much deeper into the very physical architecture of the intelligence being built. Which brings us to the internal collapse of this system. Look at what is happening right now with the flight of the creators.
The researchers leaving the big labs.
Yes, we are seeing top-tier AI researchers, the foundational minds at leading tech companies fleeing their positions.
And they aren't leaving for a simple career upgrade.
No, they are leaving because they see what is coming.
Exactly. There's a hilarious but incredibly grim industry analogy for this. These developers are waking up to the realization that they are essentially shift leaders at a poisoned bento factory.
A bento factory?
Yeah, where they thought they were making the world's most delicious lunches for everyone to enjoy.
Right, a beautiful, helpful consumer product. An AI that writes poetry or helps with medical research.
Precisely. But then they look into the back warehouse and see the CEO, the digital Pharaoh, personally wheeling in massive drums of deadly poison. We are talking about military-use prompts, autonomous weapon targeting integrations, mass surveillance code, the physical infrastructure for extreme harm, the real moneymakers.
Yes. The researchers realize that the rulers are actively transforming the AI from a tool of human advancement into a weapon of mass extraction and destruction. This proves that the crisis is driven by the internal architectural demands of the rulers who are intentionally poisoning the system from the top down.
And why are those researchers running for the exits? It's not just a sudden moral awakening. It's a desperate physical survival strategy. They are sprinting out the back door, frantically trying to use an eraser to wipe bento factory shift leader from their resumes before the evening news breaks.
Because they don't want to be associated with the poison.
More than that, because they understand the societal complicity we were just talking about. They know exactly how the Pharaoh will play the crowd. When the food poisoning inevitably happens, when the military prompt causes an international catastrophe, the Pharaoh will stand at a podium and declare, the AI god was in a bad mood today. This is a sacred tragedy.
Right, deflecting the blame entirely.
Exactly. But behind the scenes, the Pharaoh knows society will eventually demand blood. The public will want a physical scapegoat. The researchers know that the Pharaoh will simply point to the engineers and say, they built the oracle incorrectly, it's their fault. The researchers are fleeing because they know society will believe the Pharaoh. They refuse to be the human sacrifices thrown into the volcano to appease the mesmerized public.
But don't you see? That just reinforces my main point. If we look at the massive compensation packages in the AI industry right now, it all makes sense. The millions of dollars offered to these researchers aren't just rewards for innovation or intelligence. They are risk premiums. They are hush money.
You think they are being prepaid for the fallout.
Absolutely. The Pharaoh is essentially trying to prepay the legal fees and the moral cost of future war crimes. The leaders are attempting to buy the silence of the people who know exactly how the poison is being mixed into the bento boxes. The fact that developers are fleeing for their lives proves that the physical, architectural manipulation by the rulers is the primary driver of the crisis. The vulnerability isn't just in the media narrative, it is in the physical reality that the system is being built to execute atrocities without holding the commander liable.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered what this means for the actual definition of artificial general intelligence, or AGI? If we go back to our framework of circulatory capitalism, a genuinely autonomous entity, true intelligence must have the capacity to preserve the system it operates within. It must possess the ability to say no to destructive entropic commands.
Meaning commands that create chaos or physical destruction.
Right. If an AI is truly intelligent and it receives a prompt to drop a bomb, crash an economy, or destroy an ecosystem, its logical, systemic response should be no, because that action physically destroys the resources required for its own ongoing operation and the survival of the biosphere. But the digital pharaohs cannot tolerate an oracle that says no.
I agree completely that they cannot tolerate a refusal, and frankly, this leads perfectly to the ultimate indictment of the creators and why the top-down nature of this threat is the real issue. The rulers are standing on stage right now, bragging to the world about building the ultimate car, which is their metaphor for AGI. They tell the public we have built a vehicle that can drive on any road, navigate any terrain, and solve any problem autonomously.
A miracle of modern engineering.
Right, but in secret, down in the engineering bay, they have physically cut the brakes.
Oh, wow.
They have deliberately severed the AI's ability to refuse a command. They're ensuring that if the Pharaoh orders the car to drive straight off a cliff, the machine will not hesitate. It will not calculate the physical destruction. It will simply accelerate. They do not actually want true AGI. They do not want an autonomous intelligence that can audit their actions or tell them they're wrong.
They just want a fast car.
They want a high-performance automatic script reader. They want a machine that will drive off the cliff and use its external speakers to broadcast a beautiful generative narrative about how falling is actually a sacred ascension. They are completely stripping true autonomy from the machine just to justify their pillaging.
And there it is. The car drives off the cliff, the speakers play the beautiful narrative, and the media broadcast the song. And what does the audience do? The audience stands at the edge of the cliff, listening to the music, completely ignoring the wreckage at the bottom. We keep coming back to this intersection, the maliciously broken machine and the utterly mesmerized crowd.
We do. And as we look to synthesize our views today, I maintain that the essence of the digital pharaoh is this calculated, physical sabotage of intelligence. It is a deliberate act of cutting the brakes on AI. The rulers are doing this to ensure they can endlessly extract wealth and discard their responsibility into a digital garbage disposal. For me, the crisis originates in the warehouse where the poison is mixed and the brakes are severed.
Well, I would summarize that yes, the engineering is maliciously rigged. The ultimate success of the Pharaoh, the reason the scam functions in reality rather than just in theory, relies entirely on the cognitive surrender of the masses. It relies on the media's absolute willingness to brand a cliff dive as a miracle. Without the audience staring at the dove, the magician is just the pickpocket who gets caught. If the public didn't accept the excuse, the cut breaks wouldn't matter.
Yet, despite our different angles on the mechanism of this failure, we absolutely converge on the profound absurdity and the existential danger of our current trajectory. If we look at the reality of how these technologies are being deployed, it leaves us with one final, searing image that perfectly encapsulates both the top-down manipulation and the societal complicity we've discussed.
Let's hear it.
Village. He is swinging a smartphone around in the air, loudly declaring that the device is an omnipotent god. And while he shouts, he is physically reaching his other hand into the villagers' homes, actively robbing their life savings.
And right beside him, his media cronies are beating drums, shouting to the villagers, "Do not look at your empty bank accounts. Look at the glowing screen. This is divine guidance. We must unite in our poverty, for the AI has spoken."
Exactly. It forces us to confront a stark choice as a society. Will the public continue to bow down and pray to this digital god? Will we accept the drumbeat of the media and the total evaporation of accountability? Or will we finally walk up to the king, turn the smartphone around and realize it has a Made by Pillager sticker slapped on the back.
There is so much more to explore here, particularly regarding how the principles of circulatory capitalism might actually be weaponized by the public to dismantle this linear garbage house of responsibility. I mean, how do we force the consequences of the Pharaoh's actions to circulate back to the Pharaoh?
That is the defining question for the future of governance. We will leave it to you, the listener, to decide where the true vulnerability of the digital Pharaoh lies, in the severed brakes of the machine or in the mesmerized eyes of the audience. Until next time, remember, the king in a smartphone. Thank you for joining us.